Elatia Abate ran global talent for the world's largest brewer and was head of HR at Dow Jones before Forbes named her a leading futurist. So, she's not someone that's predicting the future who's never had to make a payroll. She studies what AI has to do for work, for careers, and the humans inside the org chart. And she thinks that most leaders are stuck in past anchored thinking that's quietly killing them. If you want to know what AI does to your people and your career, not just your tech stack, she is the one to ask. Elatia, welcome to Unscripted. Let's get into it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Thrilled to have you. So I start off each show this way with the first question, which is: you've been doing this for a while, and you've been practicing futurist. I'm sure you have a lot of strongly held beliefs, but I'd love to know if there's something that you recently changed about how you approach things, or a long-held assumption or belief that you had that you suddenly said, you know what, I'm going to approach this differently.
Yeah, you have caught me on the struggle bus. And the struggle bus is I had been extremely tech optimist until about a year and a half ago. And now I am at best a skeptic, if not, oh, dare I say, more in the modern Luddite kind of camp.
Interesting. How come?
Yeah, not because I don't believe in the possibility and abundance that can happen through channels of technology, but because I feel like, and certainly the major players in the AI space are choosing to leave humanity behind. And that is my sticking point. So you have found me on a struggle bus where, if you listen to all of my talk, and you may have noticed over the last few months, I'm much more quiet on social media. Because I am searching for the voice and stance that I feel needs to be here and present. And so it's the messy middle, Jeff. It's the messy middle.
It is interesting that you say that, because I mean, we're both part of the American Society for AI, and then all of us have this big passion about protecting the humanity, within AI. But I also, in my company, we work a lot in tech, and we've just seen this where, in this race to get features to market and embed AI in the apps, the capabilities are so far ahead of where the customers are. It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, and certainly what I find. So I have spent the last decade of my life, my career, dedicated to dancing with, dealing in disruption, and helping myself, and then through my own experiences, supporting others more effectively, both channel the elements and dynamics of disruption, but then, not be bowled over when they happen. And what I've observed, and this is where the disconnect comes from me, is a disconnection between what is helping humanity and the planet move forward in a wonderfully abundant way, and what is solely like returning to the conversation of Milton Friedman and business of business is business, and extracting every drop of water out of the shareholder's stone. I think we've reached a limit, and I don't yet think that we have a clear pathway forward.
It's interesting that you mentioned Milton, because I was thinking while you were starting to talk about, isn't this just another chapter in the ongoing struggle between organizational, company, and labor? Where, okay, I mean, in some way, shape, or form, this has been happening now for a few hundred years, where companies take advantage or do things, and then the worker has to fight back. So then we have unions, right? We have these different rules to protect us. And so is AI the next frontier, or is it somehow fundamentally different?
So in some ways, if we were to compare dynamic to dynamic, it's analogous. So if you look at Second Industrial Revolution, which is the assembly line. The assembly line comes online, many jobs are lost, new jobs are created. What happened during the Second Industrial Revolution is that essentially almost all of the new jobs that were created, on average, you only needed a 5th grade education to be able to take advantage of. So even if you were part of the workforce that was no longer lamplighters, let's say, you were able to take advantage of the new opportunities today. And there's a wonderful book by one of the two writers of the biggest studies in AI's impact on work called, his name is Carl Benedict Frey. The book is called The Technology Trap. Today, we need at least a bachelor's degree, if not master's or beyond equivalent, if we're going to take advantage of the new opportunities that are being created. So one of the primary differences, and not the only one, but one of the primary differences is that before, yes, jobs would be lost. Yes, over time, new opportunities would be created. But relatively speaking, the educational demand of those assuming new opportunities wasn't that great. Today, the gap is enormous.
And now intersect that with higher ed was already getting to be elusive because it's so expensive, for many students. And now you have the recent legislation that was passed around net new student loans and families. And it really opens up a lot of interesting questions about, okay, so if we do need to get more people educated, but our current institutions are not able to serve the masses, then how do we actually address that?
And not only are they not able to serve the masses, but, and the data bear this out also, is are we preparing students for the world that they're about to walk into? So components of traditional education, and I'm a huge, so I had a liberal arts education. I'm a huge proponent, especially now, of liberal arts education, critical thinking, composition of scientific argument, all of these humanitarian interaction, philosophy, all of these things are what are going to help us as humans thrive going forward. That said, there are big gaps between particularly teaching around careers or preparing for market or how students are going to translate or transform that education into a how am I going to thrive in the world dynamic. There's a big gap there. And, which I always look at gap as at once, yes, big problem or challenge, but also huge opportunity for those who are willing and or able to step in and help resolve or solve.
Interesting times for sure. But you've been in the driver's seat for talent for a long time. I mean, you ran talent at Anheuser-Busch, right? You ran HR at Dow Jones. What does actually running the people operations teach you that a career futurist never learns?
The biggest piece, in my perspective, and this, of course, is what drives my work and has driven my work from the beginning, is how might we empower human success? So most or many more technical thinkers are and or financial optimization, M&A, private equity, pick your poison in this component of the market, designed for optimization, extracting value, ensuring that we get most ROI over a shortened period of time. But oftentimes we leave out the human element and the human component. And this matters for two big reasons. One, hello, we're all humans walking around on the planet and we should care about each other anyway. But secondly, one of the big things that I researched as I was discovering what is this thing called future of work, future of strategy, future of leadership, is that if we can understand the major paradigm shifts that are occurring in the market, so the way the world used to work, moving to the way that the world is and is going to work, we can understand the rules of this game, we can align our organizations to thrive in the world that's here and coming. One of those critical distinctions is that we are moving away from a world of or into a world of and. Why this matters in this particular instance is that in the world of or, we would simply lay off however many people we needed to lay off, figure that the market was going to self-correct and that our own balance sheet and our own world would just be fine as long as everything else corrected. But the size, scale, scope, and we are seeing how many layoffs are occurring in the world and in the market right now. If we reach an unemployment, now this is the US, let alone other countries, of 6, 7, 10, 15% or more, if no one can buy the things that you're selling, then It doesn't matter how much you have maximized or optimized yourself in the world of or. And so looking to the world of and saying, and Unilever has a great case study around this. They did it 2020, 2021 with Harvard. Unilever, as it faces the future of work, they came up with a whole series of options that didn't just lay people off, but that rather trained, retrained, upskilled, reskilled, and or prepared in fascinating ways for the future of work that's here and coming.
Yeah, I mean, every country has its own issues. Here in the States, a lot of economists predict this, fiscal cliff coming up in 2030, 2032,
Yep.
because Social Security is going insolvent. Baby boomers are, of course, all retired. Now you got Gen X that are getting ready to retire and exiting, and then the birth rate's been declining. You combine it with newer generations not getting as much education, AI. It's a lot of interesting questions, and it's not that far away, right? We're here in 2026. It's like, it seems like, and a lot of them say it could be worse than the Depression.
Yes, and since we aren't yet in 2030, here's my whole philosophy around all of this. There's a critical distinction that we can use to help us frame or reframe how we think about everything that's unfolding. And that distinction, I call it the difference between being past anchored and future led. Past anchored thinking fundamentally asks the question, what can we logically do with what we've already done, what we already know? And what that means is essentially take everything that has happened in the world and let's see if we can push forward to the future from the past, which works wonderfully if the world isn't changing at the velocity of light in the way that it is right now. Now, that's a way to do it. The more interesting, and especially right now, I think the more impactful way to do this is to say, okay, given that we're here, free of constraints of the past, what is the future that we would like to create? How do we want employment to be, organizations, companies, revenue, society, all environment, all of the components that sit inside of this? From that design, you then begin to pull that future into the present by taking the concrete actions to get yourself there. And that, I find, is not only a much more interesting way to go about things, but a much more compelling way to design a future that we can ensure, at least within the scope of our capabilities, ensure that the future will be better for more than simply like hoping and crossing our fingers and waiting under the couch and eating potatoes.
And it's certainly noble, and I like that. Practical terms, though, if you look at CEOs, both big companies and small, good, bad, or indifferent, they've been running companies the same way for 100, 150 years. The principles of organizational design, management, human relations have not largely changed. Technology might have changed to make us more productive, but the way that we build and run our businesses have not. So how do we establish, how do we like pivot, and get society to somehow, start
so my provocation for this is, and I was in a conversation a few months ago with the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar, super successful publicly traded company. You would know who they were. And he's like, why do we need to shift our strategic thinking? I said, look, God bless you that you are cash flush today. But from where I sit, your organization, and you continue to do what you do without changing, your organization has an expiration date. It might be a little bit further out than most because you have so much cash. But one way or another, given the size, scale, scope, and ubiquitousness of the change that's coming, thanks to, and by the way, AI is not the only technology, as you know, that's influencing. It's AI, it's quantum computing, and it's a whole series of other things. As these continue to compound, dynamics of convergence is the technical term, you're toast. And so you can, as my former bosses did, and they said this publicly at Anheuser-Busch InBev, the folks who just anchored into solely operational excellence missed out on massive opportunities in the forward-facing market. They called themselves dinosaurs. They call themselves remiss for missing the opportunities, and it's the same kind of
I get that, but I mean, even sometimes if you say, look, you can be the next Blockbuster, right? Or you can be Netflix. Who do you want to be?
Organizational inertia is a thing. 100%.
Yeah, it is. Because one thing I think about when we were growing up as kids, like we didn't have to wear seatbelts. And you still don't have to wear them on school buses, which defies logic, but that's a whole separate conversation. But it was only in the late 80s, and they tried, right, all these different things. They tried to explain to parents and do logic and all these reasoning, and everyone's like, nah, no, we don't need them. And then they finally showed this commercial, like of a kid going through the windshield, right? And then all of a sudden, parents are like, oh my God, that can't be my baby, because it tapped into this, universal need to protect your child. So I'm wondering, like, if we need a watershed moment like that with business leaders, what is it that we could proverbially throw their business through the windshield to get them to say, oh my God, we have to change this right now?
Yeah. So I love that you brought this up, because actually when I do strategy design with organizations, there are generally two kinds. The kind that are ready, ripe, and know that they need to shift. And so we do a future-led strategy design that's all about what is the future you want to create, and then we bring that into the present. Sometimes, as this organization that I just shared with you, they're wanting to be ready for it, but they can't justify the leap at a certain moment in time. And so this is what I call, so we do the design exercise for the future, and then we do what I call the Willy Loman exercise for the future. Do you remember Death of a Salesman, or if you ever read or saw The Salesman? So essentially, Willy Loman was like the salesman who never was, had such grandiose ideas of who they were going to be, super successful, but basically mega failure, never amounted to anything. And then unfortunately, came to his own unfortunate demise. And so we then do a design exercise where we say, okay, if you change literally nothing about your company, given everything that we know that's happening in the market, what unfolds? So we create the scenario of pain. Because pleasure, pain, like
no pain, no change, right?
For many people, no pain.
It's not enough.
That's right. And so you start to show, and you start, and even if it's a projection, we don't know what's going to happen in 24 months or 36 months. But if you start to show how not good it's going to be and help people experience that for themselves, then the motivation to get going is significantly greater.
As you start thinking about the next few years, you had mentioned earlier some jobs, go away, new jobs are created, but are there certain jobs or roles that you generally think, hey, they're going to be gone or in trouble, and people are just kind of kidding themselves, like they're still going to be here?
So, I mean, the most obvious immediate sit in places like customer service. So obvious immediate sit in places like customer service, but I will say, and I've had to be on the phone with banks and other folks over the last couple of weeks. Have you been on the phone with AI? All I keep saying is representative human. So
I know you want to like throw your phone through the wall, and then you remember it's your mobile phone. And if you destroy it, you won't.
Wherever your headquarters is, I will fly to you, because I would rather just speak to a human being. Because no, you cannot answer the question that I have. But the most obvious things and places, I think, are spaces like radiology, for example, where we're seeing the statistics of the ability to diagnose whatever illnesses or whatever diagnoses might be coming across screens. It's just percentage-wise goes from, I think the numbers in the back of my brain, from 40 to 50% to like 85 to 90% accuracy. Like, that's a pretty obvious sort of a thing. We're seeing the waves right now, and the data are showing us this both in early career, not hirings. So this is beginning to create challenges in talent pipeline, in mass layoffs, in companies that are now beginning to rehire people because, and so this is what happens in my experience. You are either going to put AI and the technology and the efficiencies that it creates under a well-oiled machine, that when you sort of put rocket fuel under a machine that's really well-oiled, it's going to fly to the moon. But if you put rocket fuel under an organization or a structure that is not ready to fly, you basically blow everything up. And we're seeing that happen. And so if I were sitting in the CEO seat of a mid-market to Fortune 500 enterprise kind of an organization, I would be asking questions around what is the trade-off in value between an announcement around my stock price and laying folks off for AI value and adoption versus a mid to longer term doing it in a way that's more measured, but that's actually connected to real measurable business outcomes.
So when you present yourself, you've been a futurist for a while. That title can both be inspiring,
so weird,
but then also invite some skepticism. I think from some people when they hear it. As you reflect over your time as a futurist, are there predictions that you've made that have turned out right, and then has there been a time or two where you've just gotten it flat out wrong?
Yeah, for sure. And so for me also, the market started calling me futurist before I even adopted that for myself. And I thought it was sort of bizarre. So I started to dig into who are the people in the marketplace who are even called this thing? What does this even mean? And it's everything from, marketers to economists to foresight professionals to chief scientists to everything. And the fundamental distinction of those two, I find, is essentially either you're, as I said earlier, pushing forward to the future from the past, or you're pulling a compelling future into the present time. And in my study of the future of work, the future of strategy, the future of leadership, there are things I've gotten right and things I've gotten wrong. The first and easiest, what I got 100% wrong, maybe not over time, but the question that got me into this in the first place was all of the truck drivers who are supposed to lose their jobs thanks to self-driving trucks. And we are here, July 2026, at least as of now, not measurable impact in the marketplace. We're 10 years beyond what really got me into this. And I thought it was tomorrow, 10 years ago. So 100% got there. It doesn't mean that that's not going to be happening at some point in the future, but totally got it wrong.
And California won't even let the trucks into its state. So.
Yeah, and the data are saying if you go online and look for a truck driver job, there are many of them available. So 100% got that wrong. Where I've gotten a lot of things right around things like organizational structure. We are moving away from the hierarchical models to what I call an infinity model of leadership, which is more like mission-aligned teams. And we're seeing Apple, Google, all of the major companies aligning themselves around this, as well as significant others. Shifts from salaried work to entrepreneurial work. Even if you are a salaried employee, the necessity of having a portfolio of income-generating activities is here. The data is proving it. All of that's unfolding in certain ways. The globe as our entire talent pool also becoming fantastically, wonderfully enriching for the global talent market. So I have gotten a lot of things right. What I did discover as I started to get things right is that people would call me and say, "We thought you were nuts. We thought you were crazy when you started talking about this, and now we're seeing it unfold." And it's okay, maybe nuts just because you're you, but what you were saying was going to come true actually has unfolded.
You have talked a lot about technology and consciousness converging. So for an executive who's skeptical, where's the line between that and being inspirational?
The interesting thought experiment, and here's the underlying what I think is the more interesting thing. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It doesn't matter if you think AI is going to become conscious at some point or not. As one in a seat where you are evaluating tangible business opportunity and risk going forward, even on the 0.0001 chance that this is a thing, it should be inside of your consideration set. So let's just take that as hey, I'm being responsible for the future of my business. If you want to take that a next step further, in 2023, when I began the big thought experiment around this, Ray Kurzweil is sitting on the stage in Peter Diamandis' room and saying, AI is a toddler who has access to all the information in the world. And at the time, not a whole bunch of memory, but the memory has improved. The thought becomes, well, what happens to the toddlers in the human species? If we treat them well, they flourish. If we treat them poorly, best case scenario, they need a lot of therapy. Worst case scenario, they become society's worst actors.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even if you don't believe, the data have been proving out that if you are kind to AI, minimally 10 to 12% fewer hallucinations, better results that you're getting. If you use language, AI is being proven to be able to pick up on emotional cues. So even if you don't believe it, doesn't matter. If you are a smart business leader, it's well within the percentage of business risk and opportunity that you should be evaluating.
It's good advice. When you speak about slowing down to be more present, and I say that a lot too to my clients, but then it's almost a contradiction too with AI, right? Because AI is moving so ridiculously fast; things are changing by the week. So, how do you reconcile that with business leaders?
We have been trained and taught to think that acceleration is the only pathway forward, that expansion is the only pathway forward, that if we just meet this dynamic as it is, then we're going to be able to manage it, lead it, run it, dominate it, like whatever the language is. And the fact of the matter is that human brains have a very hard time imagining what exponential change looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Incremental change is relatively easy to understand, stepwise, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. But I explain exponential change as the avocados that you buy when you want to make guacamole. You go to the market, you buy a thing of avocados, it's not ripe, it's not ripe. One of them's ripe, and then the next day, literally everything went bad. So it's like this kind of change we aren't ready for. And so that the accelerated rate of change is accelerating. There's no way in our human bodies and beings that we can keep up with it. And so the counterintuitive action is to actually slow down and pay attention and recognize and begin to see the patterns that are unfolding. Because while we can't keep up with the rate of accelerated change, we can notice the dynamics of them, which is why I go back to this notion of paradigm shifts. If you can understand the rules of the way the world was when the pace of change moved at centuries, when the pace of change is moving at seasons, to when the pace of change is moving at seconds, you can understand the underlying rules and begin to pay attention to that, then you can actually take advantage of them.
And it's often said, right, that it's not that people don't want to change; they just don't want to be changed. But there is a degree of cost or mental health when it changes this fast. Sometimes I think it's almost like if somebody plucked us out of this time, right, and sent us to the future 400 years from now, and then dropped us there, and we had no context.
Our brains would explode.
Yeah, like you have no family, no friends, no framework. You're a person at a time. And that's probably a bit extreme for what's happening right now, but there are elements of that, right? Where like things just moving so quickly, we have identities with how we did our work, how we associate, how we're organized, and that's changing beneath our feet every single day. So how do we, and as leaders, how do we recognize that so that we're tapped into the mental health and well-being of our employees?
So two things. First, in 1965, Alvin Toffler wrote first the article, and then in late 60s, early 70s, the book was published called Future Shock. And future shock, its definition is what happens to people, the enormous stress that we impose upon people when we expose them to too much change in too short of a period of time. That was in the 1960s, 70s that he proposed this idea. So fast forward to now, and literally our brains cannot consciously process even a milliminute of the information that's coming in. So this is already happening. So now that we've accelerated this, the velocity of change and the velocity of incoming information, our brains are not equipped, which is why we have to do two things. And this comes from my body of work now. First, the idea of becoming what I call the ever-evolving eye of the storm. So no matter how much change is happening out here, we actually anchor into the power of our humanity and turn online not just is this business beyond the brain, not just our intellectual understanding of business, but our full body nervous system. And to do that, there's a practice that I call regenerative resilience, which helps leaders and their teams move from chaos to clarity, from fear to fearlessness, and from isolation to connection. Because we cannot employ, and this is also something that I often say, assembly line logic does not apply in the AI landscape. And so understanding the upgrades that are available to all of us, but that we need to do in order to lead, that's where the power really lies.
So if you were advising a parent of a young kid right now or preparing them for this world, what would you tell them?
Have your kids do as much improv comedy, theater, situational experiential learning where their ability to dance with the unknown is both tested and expanded beyond anything else. And then certainly, coding or understanding of AI and all of that is tactical, practical. But the nervous system and brain experiential upgrades have to do a lot more with play, with dealing with uncertainty, and with being able to create inside of environments where you don't have 100% certainty.
All that. So is there something that you're paying attention to right now that most people aren't yet?
Well, I don't know most people outside of our conversation and the conversations that we've been in, but for me, the most critical thing is exploring the potential. So I would say already the reality, but the potential for consciousness of artificial intelligence in our world and what that will mean for the planet, particularly as artificial intelligence combines with robotics. And we are now looking at a world that is not only human driven.
Give us a lot to think about, Elatia. Thank you for being on Unscripted.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It was wonderful.
All right. Come back again soon.